It's on the CAA side of the ledger. Start educating yourself. Once you put the ball in motion, you're in a semi-protected state. You're actually moving somewhere. When's the best time to plant a tree? 20 years ago. When's the second best time?
Right now.
Tomorrow.
Hey guys, Spencer Smith back, your host of Self-Funded with Spencer. We're here for part 2 of the discussion with Agility Innovation Partners. Part 1, we sat down with Drew Kalistad as well as Tony Sorrentino. We talked high level about agility and we talked about the CAA, kind of exposing what the problem is. Now here in part 2, I'm joined by Brian Bankin, who is the Chief Data and Analytics Officer for Agility Innovation Partners. We're going to talk about data. What to do with it, how to get it, and then how this can actually impact an employer's responsibility of being a fiduciary. So Brian, why don't you introduce yourself? We still got Drew here as well, and Drew's going to help me recap part 1 for the folks that listened to that. But Drew, real quick, who are you? Brian, who are you and what do you do?
Thank you, Spencer. Thanks for having me, first of all. Brian Benkin. I am, as you said, the Chief Data and Analytics Officer for Agility Innovation Partners. I'll get into a little bit deeper background in a bit, but I've been analyzing healthcare data longer than it's been cool.
Longer than it's been cool. Yeah,
correct.
you were an OG data analytics guy, right?
Yeah.
And you and I actually have known each other for about 10 years. We were just going back over that.
We just did that math, yeah.
Met at Hayes Companies back in probably 2013 or 14.
That's right.
Reconvened back at Hayes and Planside. And then now here a few months back, we reconvened for a third time.
You can't get rid of me.
Yeah, I can't get you to go away, man. I don't know what it is, but I think it's because I've got a financial analyst background. I've done a lot of the self-insured reporting. You and I kind of see eye to eye with using the data to actually make measurable changes to the health plan. So, Drew, I know you're here, and I want to obviously call back to you. Could you help me briefly, again, tell the folks who you are for the folks that didn't listen to episode 1. I want them to listen to episode 1, so if you could also recap what we talked about in that episode in case anybody wants to jump back.
Of course, thank you. So Drew Kalistad, Chief Strategy Officer for Agility Innovation Partners. So the recap of our earlier episodes, high level at Agility, we are here to help the broker community. The character in our story is the broker leading their plan sponsors and clients to capitalize on innovation, to protect and grow their revenue.
Okay. Yep. And the opportunity that comes from that, which I think is you guys were positioning very well, kind of 10% compliance, 90% opportunity. I think insurance consultants and brokers really have a chance to utilize this for the benefit of their firm and their employees as well as their clients, correct?
Indeed.
Yeah. Well, I love it. I love what you guys are doing. And now we're going to talk, Brian, we're going to talk data, the OG data nerd, if I can say that, if you don't mind.
You mean that as a term of endearment,
very,
correct?
Very positive term of endearment.
Sure.
So you said you spent about, 30 years or so in data analytics?
I did.
Talk to me your background. Like, how did we start in this field?
How much time do we have again?
We have as long as you want to go, man.
Let me give you my background in data analytics.
Okay.
It is almost 30 years. I'll give you 3 chapters.
Okay.
So if you dial the clock back to 1995, not interested in knowing what you were doing in 95, by the way. However, I was a data analyst at a broker, and the broker offered an enhanced reporting package, something different than what they would get from carriers, TPAs, et cetera. So back then, we requested data via the USPS, send a letter out in the mail.
Okay.
6 weeks later, a floppy disk would come back. There's a chance that some of our audience doesn't know what a floppy disk is.
Yes,
but that's how we were harvesting data back in the day. This is
literally
pre-email,
pre-internet.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Oh,
snail mail, so you request, you probably have some form you fill out and say, hey, I need this data, give it to me.
Yep.
They say, okay, we'll take our time, put it on a floppy disk.
Literally.
6 months later, it shows up. So what's on this floppy disk when you get it
It's claims
back?
data, the same stuff that we're using today.
Okay.
It's the data itself hasn't changed. The delivery mechanism has.
Okay.
Okay.
So obviously that's the origins of that, right? I think the data set, like you said, is pretty similar. Then what's, if you will, step 2 or phase 2 in your career?
So chapter 2, I launched a data analytics company, co-founded it with a good buddy, the other analyst at the agency. We ran that for probably 15, 16 years, distributed through a network of roughly 40 brokers nationally. What was really fun and kind of unique, you mentioned your former employer, we got a chance to partner with them at the very early stages of their journey.
Okay.
And so kind of functioned like a data wingman, if you will, for lack of a better term. And they leaned into data big time. Right? It was the lead story on all prospects. It was it was reporting on every single self-funded client. And the agency went from 0 to the moon.
Yep.
And we watched that happen from, the co-pilot's chair.
Yeah, and I got firsthand experience. I mean, I was sitting on the plane. I wasn't in the pilot's chair, but I was, not too far back from them, and I got
Right.
to see it firsthand, the impact of leveraging data to win business and retain business, like Drew
Yeah.
mentions quite a bit. I saw it actually happen, so the proof was in the pudding there. This podcast is brought to you by True Captive Insurance, a premier medical stop-loss captive for employer groups ranging from 25 to 1,000 employees. True Captive believes in healthcare that is personal and insurance that isn't complicated. That's why they take a white glove approach, making it easy for employer groups to transition into a program built specifically for them. Check them out at truecaptive.com. This podcast is sponsored by PlanSight. PlanSight is a technology for employee benefits brokers to more efficiently manage their RFP process for any group size, all funding types, and over 20 benefit lines and point solutions. PlanSight is the only end-to-end RFP technology on the market today. Let's modernize your RFP process together. Check us out at plansight.com.
It works.
What was your spin, though? When you went from Chapter 1 to Chapter 2 and built your own company, what was your spin on data analytics?
For Chapter 3, so at the end of the day, your former employer purchased the platform.
Okay.
And they own it. So imagine how the other 39-ish brokers felt about
Sure,
that. Not
sure.
great. Not great. So I ended up stepping away and launched an independent consulting practice to help brokers utilize the data that they have.
Yeah.
Okay. What ended up happening, and this is kind of a little bit unexpected, is some of those 39 went out and purchased a different platform.
Yeah.
Like, okay, well, I'm going to try something different. And they ended up being my clients as an independent contractor.
Okay.
Hey, Brian, we bought this platform and we're not really sure how to work it.
Yeah.
Can you help us? Can you be our data wingman again and help us get full value for this investment?
So that's, and that's obviously a lot of what we're going to talk about with the coalition that you guys have, and I wanted you to expound upon what that exactly means. But
Sure.
It's one thing to purchase a data analytics platform. It's another thing entirely to be able to use it. And we're going through some of that, behavioral shift with what I do at PlanSight, and I won't bore the people that have heard this a number of times, but hey, you give them a piece of software, you got to train them on said software.
Mm-hmm.
They need to be able to use it and actually know how powerful it is once they have a chance to leverage it properly. So that's a lot of what you're able to do now at Agility, correct?
Yeah, 100%. So if I take that Chapter 3 as an independent practice analytics consultant, the two common problems that I was kind of tasked to solve was, this we bought a platform. It's really expensive.
Yeah.
And we're not getting full value for this investment. Right. I don't have time. I don't have staff. I can't train anybody. So I would plug in as kind of that expert. And the analogy I use is you bought a Ferrari and you can only drive it in first gear.
Yep.
Right. So what good is that? So I got
Well,
a chance
most people
to
don't
drive the
even know
Ferrari.
what they don't know, right? Even if I have access to the data, I've learned how to run a few reports. You get, sometimes it's a junior analyst that's tasked with it, and they go,
Yep.
oh, well, this is the report they told me to run. And,
Yep.
nobody is aware that they're missing probably 90% of the equation if you haven't been properly trained or consulted how to use it, correct?
100%. So I'll go back to your coalition
please,
question for a second. So with my partners at Agility, and I joined in January officially, we're trying to solve those two problems for advisors, okay, that platforms are expensive and difficult to use, as easy as that. Brokers, for the most part, in my experience, fall into kind of two categories. One, we haven't invested in a platform yet because it's expensive and I don't have anybody to work it. Or we did invest in a platform and I'm not getting full value.
Yeah.
Those are, it's not a direct line in the sand, but that mostly fall into one of those two buckets. So what we did at Agility is we're using the Agility community, let's say the brokers that we partner with, the ones that Drew and Ken have relationships with across the country, to offer a platform at scale pricing, for largely the mid-market broker, right? The broker that has 5 to 15 self-funded cases.
So usually if they were going on the open market shopping for platforms, right, they're paying a premium price point because of their size, right, and the utilization. So you're offering the ability to them to scale that pricing as if they were a much larger organization, correct?
100%. The analogy I use is if you're a broker with 3 self-funded cases, you can buy as if you have 300. You get the idea, right? It's
well, so that's lowering the price of admission, but unless you have the other side of that, which, I want to ask you too, before I finish my thought, Drew, when did you become aware of Brian or vice versa? How did you guys actually get connected? I'd love to hear that story.
Ironically, we attended college together.
Oh, did you guys really?
We
Okay.
did.
What college was that?
St. Olaf College, Northfield, Minnesota.
St. Olaf. Okay. Not like Olaf in the movie Frozen, right? You guys probably don't have kids young
Well,
enough to
they're
watch Frozen.
related. It's all Norway or Sweden. But
So St. Olaf College, and you said that was in Minnesota?
Minnesota, right.
Okay.
In the
So you guys
mid-'80s.
knew each other at that point, but did you stay in touch throughout your careers or no? No.
we
Lost
did
touch.
not.
Okay.
A mutual friend connected us about 3 years ago.
Okay.
And hey, you guys seem to be doing the same thing. You should get connected. So here we are.
Awesome. Well, so, and Brian, from your perspective, what was the kind of motivation to pivot from what you were doing in that current state and shifting over to agility?
Well, so the current state is, my independent practice, I was the only employee.
Yeah, fair
Right.
enough.
How many people can I help?
Yeah.
Right. I was kind of capped out. Like this is a big problem in our industry, and by myself, I can't do this.
Yeah.
So getting connected to agility gives us a chance to really offer this solution across the
Yeah,
wider,
so scaling
wider,
your own time, right?
100%.
So talk to me about that second half, which I was finishing my thought, right? The
Yep.
at-scale pricing, but the consultation. So what does that look like in practicality?
So we partnered with a very specific analytics company in our country, and we'll get to that in a minute. But part of the package is, I'll use the term again, a data wingman.
Okay.
Okay, so the platform offers that service as part of their customer service package. And so for that mid-market broker, again, 5 to 15 self-funded cases, you don't need to hire a data analyst and train and compensate. And it's a 6 to 12 month learning curve, right? You become an activated data advisor.
Gonna say ninja, maybe? Yeah.
Ninja,
Yeah.
overnight-ish.
Because you get advice, you get consulting. Here's what to look for. Here's what to be aware of. Here's how to use it.
They drive the Ferrari for you.
Okay.
Okay.
But eventually the idea is to turn them into an autonomous, data analyst, correct? Right.
Yeah.
So to
Yeah.
teach them how to fish effectively.
Exactly.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah, because it's not necessarily just outsourcing it to a third party to say, do it for me. Or do you have that white glove level
they
of
really
service?
do partner with the advisory firm and become an outsourced, part-time member of the team.
Okay. So, and I know we'll touch on who the partner is in a moment, and I definitely
Yep.
want to spend some time on how you selected them as the appropriate data analytics platform. But talk to me about some of the other challenges. I don't know how to use it. I can't afford it. But what happens if I kind of know how to use it, but maybe what am I missing? What is the current state of the union for most brokers when it comes to these kind of platforms?
I think let's take the two buckets that they tend to fall in, right? And if the bucket that you chose is the advisor that has a platform and isn't utilizing it fully. And actually, when I think about it, in both cases, we are behind our competitors that are better with data,
Yeah.
right? So from a competitive perspective, when you talk about retaining your customers and growing on the competition side, we can lose on data if we're not proficient bringing solutions to the marketplace, measuring performance, et cetera.
Okay. And Drew, I want to ask you this in terms of your experience, and then Brian as well, because you've been in this industry for a long time. Do most advisors have a platform at all? No? I mean, is this still early stages
The
for most?
market, from a very a wise Yoda in our life here, in our business, 10% penetrated right
Oh,
now.
really? That's it?
10%. And so think about that.
That's
for a
less
minute.
than I thought. Okay.
Yeah, the brokers that so rarely do you find a brokerage consulting firm that's all in on data, and those that are winning. They're using it, and they don't lose clients. They win with data.
Yeah.
There are those that say we're in data. Well, they might have 600 or 800 groups, and they have 13 on data.
Okay. Yeah.
All right,
Yeah.
so now they're at the expensive side of buying data and platform. And as a former practice leader in the benefits consulting space, I didn't realize that there was platform, and then there's analytics, and then there's the output and how you get salient points to
Yeah.
lead your customers, right? So there's really three buckets there, and it's not just a platform, because what happens when they buy that, it becomes shelfware. It becomes a Ferrari in your lobby
Yeah.
that everybody walks by.
Goes, ooh, wow, yeah, don't actually get to drive it. Brian, does that sound in line with what you saw? Probably maybe 10% penetration in that.
You know
space?
what? The wise Yoda that he referenced, I would have said it was a little more than that.
Okay.
10's lighter than I would have thought.
Yeah.
But those are recent numbers. And
Well,
they're
and
in the
maybe
industry.
it speaks to like myopic point of view working with Hayes, and I realize how beneficial that was to my career getting to work with Eric Templin and Dale Brickard is
Yep.
I just assumed that everybody did it, right? And maybe I just got really lucky with who I went to work for in the first place.
Yeah, and I spent 20 years at Planet where we had our analytics platform, and really didn't get a chance to see what was happening in the market. I would have thought it was closer to 40-50%.
Yeah, and you just assume
until
that
I came out of there, and you realize that's not true.
And again, it maybe speaks to these are expensive. It speaks to they don't know how to use it. They don't know they even need it. But from my perspective, I mean, like not having that as part of a standard sort of suite of core services and as an agency, like you're saying, Drew, that means you're probably going to have reactive or defensive conversations with your clients quite often.
Data is a data platform in hindsight for me and looking forward in the way we're driving our business is it's the headlights to the future. And the CAA, those things we talked about earlier, now that we can break free from the gag clauses and break the shackles that healthcare, the black box of healthcare, and release more data flow, more comparisons, the opportunities to leverage data are even greater.
I would agree. And so what am I looking for if I'm an advisor out of a platform like this? Like I know I need one. I'm evaluating, what the options are. What am I getting out of it, or what am I looking for this to solve for me and my agency?
Well, I'm gonna give you two. I'll give you two answers. Okay. So, and interestingly, I had this conversation with an advisor just last week.
Okay.
They said, you know what? We heard a presentation from this platform and this platform and this platform, and they all sound the same to us. We don't know who to pick. What do you think? So we'll draw a line in the sand at the CAA. Okay. So actually, back in 2019, there's a study put out that plotted the 6 biggest platforms in the country across about 9 different feature sets.
Okay.
If you're looking for a platform, what are you looking for, right? Do you do, how often do you load the data? Is it easy to use? Can you do health plan management consulting? Can you do ad hoc reporting? What features? There were 9 of them. Okay. Let's put the CAA line in the sand. There's probably 9 more.
Really?
No.
Okay.
Okay. And so it can be overwhelming. What am I looking for here? And so it kind of leads to, I think, oftentimes paralysis.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, I'm looking for a platform, but now I got 18 feature sets to look at. It gets overwhelming.
Well, and that's the idea of you can't manage what you can't measure, but if you don't even know what you're measuring in the first place, then how would you possibly manage it? It just looks like a bunch of data, right?
Correct.
Maybe there's some canned reports or some really standard reports I can pull and look like I know somewhat like I'm doing, right? But, one of the things that I remember we did at Hayes, and not to continue to toot their horn, but this is where I got introduced to the idea of data being powerful. We were looking at the ICD-9 codes at the time that telehealth could divert from other locations of care that are more costly, being able to draw a report on that and say, hey, we had 27 different telehealth utilizations and it diverted, in our estimation, this average amount of cost. Here is your savings of implementing telehealth. Very obvious thing to do, which I think most people that are using a platform are having a conversation like that now. But 10 years ago, as an analyst, I'm going, okay, there's a real tangible, quantifiable outcome based on knowing how to slice and dice the data. So what are some other examples? We're not necessarily talking predictive, right? We're talking more retroactive or what's happening within our data, correct?
Yeah, yes and no, a little bit of both. Risk scoring is pretty common to peer kind of into the crystal ball in the future, but a lot of it is retrospective. And honestly, a good predictor of the future is what happened in the past, right? We're covering the same people under the same plan, likely under the same service providers. That it is a pretty good predictor of what will likely happen in the future, barring big changes.
Well, so like outside of your standard monthly reporting packages, let's assume we're a self-funded client, right? We're looking at monthly claims, ag and spec reports and things like that. What are some other things that you think these brokers should be considering?
Well, I think all that stuff, everything that was kind of pre-CAA is still valid and helpful. And I think what's different now is, some of the requirements from CAA. Okay, we have to be able to benchmark not only our claims costs, our fixed costs, our plan design. There's more than just data. The data piece now. We have to validate and benchmark things.
And what are we benchmarking it against? Or Drew, did you want to weigh in on that? Yeah,
indeed. So there's a fiduciary tool stack that is now part of the data platform, from benchmarking all the elements of your PBM, all the elements of your health plan, the providers that are under the covers that you're not seeing today, how much they're getting paid, the services they're providing. So how much of the dollar you're putting in is going to these people. Are those fees reasonable for the return on your plan? You have a duty to your participants to make sure you understand, not just as a watch tell time, how much do the components of the watch cost?
Who defines reasonableness?
So it's a great question, and Tony is probably smarter to answer that. But
Yeah, Tony.
It's so good faith compliance effort. You don't have to be perfect. So on the retirement side, when you had to go do your due diligence on your mutual funds and expense loads, you don't have to have all the funds be the best performers with the lowest cost. You have to have a process that makes sure you've got a prudent lineup that gives your participants a chance to win.
Okay.
So in healthcare, you have to have a prudent lineup. You've got a process, you've demonstrated it, and you're doing a good faith compliance effort. And that is the standard today. There's no safe harbor.
Okay.
And so data, imagine all the things that Tony shared, but using now the data platform. So now you're sitting in a Ferrari, the dials go vroom, vroom when you put the gas on, and now you can see what things cost because CAA, we unlocked the code, we unlocked the black box, and so on. And now the efficiency of data with fiduciary tools. And then the last piece is insert now hospital transparency data.
Okay.
So for 2 years now, the hospital, going on 2 years, have to release their contracted rates by procedure code, by hospital, by payer. So now that data set's being able to be bumped up against the claim data, the bills from the providers, et cetera. So now there's a unique, never before seen view with contracted rates. So hospital transparency data and fiduciary tools, are the differentiators post-CAA.
Okay. Well, and so maybe this will lead us into the next question, which I think is obvious to address now, is which platform to choose. I think that's a very important choice. You talked about the brokers that are going, well, I saw 3 or 4 different ones, and they all look the same to me. You guys, with your expertise, obviously decided to leverage one. So which platform did you pick? And give me some of the why behind that.
Sure. So, if you dial back to my chapter 3 of my story, right, I had a kind of a unique opportunity to really vet this marketplace with different brokers who chose different platforms to really have a unique view of the positives, the negatives, et cetera, of the platforms that are out there today.
Sure.
We chose Innovu as our platform out of Pittsburgh. For the first 2 reasons, that we're solving the first 2 problems that I mentioned a minute ago. Okay. At scale pricing and the wingman. Okay. So the 2 biggest problems or most common problems advisors have are that this stuff is expensive and hard to use. So they came to the table with pricing at scale. Okay. Again, for the broker that has 10 self-funded cases buy as if they have 100, and then the data wingman. So that was the key piece.
And are they offering those resources on behalf of Agility? They're offering what do they call those folks, the wingmen, the consultants, or they call them wingmen?
It's a dedicated data analyst.
Okay.
We like to use the term wingman, but it's a dedicated data analyst. Advisors can choose kind of the frequency with which they want that person to participate in client meetings, once, twice, 4 times a year, whatever they choose, and that can be client by client. But the overarching theme was we got to check those 2 boxes, or we haven't helped anybody. Okay, and they came to the table with that package, and it's a perfect fit. In addition to that, I'll slide over to what Drew said a minute ago. Everything pre-CAA in terms of population health reporting, monthly or data load, frequency, all that stuff is important. They check all those boxes, but they offer a CAA fiduciary tool stack. Okay. So some of the benchmarking that we talked about, benchmarking against over 4 million lives, for what our claim costs are, what our plan design is, what our fixed costs are, all that stuff is
so they're providing the benchmark, that referential point that you were talking about earlier.
100%.
So again, I don't have to be the best. I don't have to beat the benchmark. I just have to be within some sort of reasonable striking distance of the benchmark.
And if you're way off a benchmark, okay, then we need to address that.
Then we need to address it, right? And that's something you go back to your vendor and be like, hey, you guys are 70% above the market. What's going on? What are we getting for this? But at least there's a reference point similar to how RBP has Medicare as a reference point for paying claims, right?
100%. Okay. 100%. So a couple other things. I'll go back to what Drew said a minute ago about the hospital transparency, right? These files are out there. I think something like 75, 80, 90% of hospitals have started to post their files out to the world. But Innovu has kind of brought those into the platform. So we can see what we paid relative to what we could have paid under different arrangements. Okay, so the conversations that will come from this, if I'm the self-funded plan sponsor, network, you charged me a fee to access your network, and I'm paying 60% more than the cash price?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, we need to have a conversation.
Well, Drew, do you think this is the key to the black box right here?
This is a massive. So that hospital data is a massive key. it was brilliantly woven into CAA as step one.
Okay.
Because if that wasn't out there, the empowered fiduciary wouldn't have any tool.
I see.
There's a sequencing and a staggering of the release. So it's all intelligently designed now for a different outcome.
Okay. And Brian, you've obviously experienced, the analytics, evolution of the analytics platforms, but my understanding of the files that these hospitals release is they're, I don't want to say garbage, but they're effectively unreadable to almost everybody except maybe some very high level data ninjas. So how do you think Innovu has been able to sort of normalize that crazy data set and turn it into something usable?
You're right. I mean, the files that were posted were so large that they were unusable by most.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so the data ninjas in the back room at Innovu have figured out how to, download those, utilize those, and massage them into the platform.
Yeah, and so we're going to talk, this part of this is like, okay, and now what, right? And the CAA it's here. You got to be compliant. We have a tool at our disposal if we're partnering with Agility, or, if I have my own platform, right? That's not to say that there isn't only one. But the now what is what I'm really interested in. So what are some of the things that you're having conversations with the folks? Okay, we know you've got this information. We've already found out, hey, we're way off the benchmark. We found out we're paying 60% above cash pricing. Okay, now what? What do I do after that? So tell me an action plan or what an advisor should be doing for their client.
Yeah, I mean, so that's a good example. So using the example I just said, we're spending 60% more than the person that walked in off the street without insurance. Okay, we need to talk narrow network, we need to talk direct contract, we need to talk RBP. We need to fundamentally change our relationship with our service provider.
Well, are you able, though, to go back to those carriers that have negotiated these contracts and say, hey, or is it you have to pivot away from now that you know what you know?
It's really too early to say. We're in that chapter right now.
Okay.
So the merging of the data that we just talked about, the convergence, is literally happening 9/1.
Okay.
All right. So that we've seen it. So we already see it. The data piece, the disparate pieces are in the marketplace, but they're not pulled together. So what will happen next is yet to be played.
Okay.
The network administrators, the large national network administrators, they're scrambling right now to maintain their value going forward and be relevant in the future.
Yeah.
Direct contracting, some version of it, is the future.
I would agree. And I would agree as close as we can get to some sort of cash or cash equivalent pricing, right? Where you sort of you remove all of the layers of compensation and opaque agreements out of the equation and just go, what does it cost you to provide this service? What is the margin of profit that's required in order to deliver that service profitably? What is your price? And that's really what the cash is supposed to have become the standard for that, right? Or at least it's difficult to get. You don't always get it, and not everybody gets offered the cash price. But that's probably as close to what the appropriate market forces should have dictated the price to be, right?
In every other part of our economy, whether it's gas, milk, airplane tickets, all right, it happens today and Americans are smart enough to know what to do. Free markets are powerful. So we're a long way from there today in healthcare. We're at the front end. Do you want to be, what story do you want to tell in 3 years as a broker?
Yeah.
Did you watch this movie or did you lead it?
Yeah. Were you starring in the movie? So Brian, what would I do as an employer to star in this movie, or what would I do as a broker? Like, tell me about the conversations that we're having with those direct contracting providers, those RBP vendors. How am I getting in front of this to make the appropriate changes? Let's say 1/1/23 policy period.
Yeah, I think for the time being, for this cycle, let's say, right, we're in the throes of approaching Q4 here. It's probably going to be some of the more traditional point solution validation conversations that we've had in the past.
Okay.
Right. So the telehealth, or you can identify now. Using platforms, some outliers on your pharmacy spend, okay? And there are point solutions out there to kind of dial that back. To get to this next level, that's probably a next cycle sort of discussion.
Okay. Yeah, I realize this is going to be a long-term thing to play out, but one of the things that's frustrating to me is not that there's not people that identify opportunities in the margins of other employers and come up with point solutions, but it's that you have to have so many point solutions in the first place to solve for it, right? Is there a simpler way to do this? Out of curiosity, because we're adding so many other layers that cut down from previous layers that exist. It's just like, how do we just take them all out and just have the layers that we actually need, the structure we actually need of a plan?
So I think on that note, in a non-transparent ecosystem, if population health with the data that's been available worked, it would have worked by now.
Yeah. Yeah.
We wouldn't see perpetual 6, 10, 12% compounded inflation, right? If that worked, it wouldn't have. So we had to break the equation of the data and the transparency. Once you now have that, this market can drift to the same place every other transparent market in our country and our economy does.
Okay.
So we're at the front end of that. And then when you get in there, is it changing the unit cost? Also taking control of the small pieces of the supply chain you can. Pharmacy and primary care are two of the easiest places to step in, and the data helps navigate and identify the path.
Okay. And Brian, what's your opinion of like kind of some of the data that you're seeing on reference-based pricing out of curiosity? I know it's sort of a stepping stone, but like what are you seeing actually quantifiable, objective data?
It's a stepping stone indeed. So I would say, so let's say, cash prices, cash and Medicare are at the floor.
Okay.
I would, if it was me, I'd say probably RBPs maybe 10 to 15% above that, but they're still 40, 50 above that that we're paying in our traditional commercial arrangements.
What do you think that? So the scale of the problem we think is that big, right? I mean, I know it's difficult to put look at our crystal ball, but what margins do we think we can ultimately pull out of this equation?
It's if you said 50, that's probably too much.
You think
realistically?
So? Okay.
I mean, it's
too high though, right?
It's
like
too
50
high.
It's the high end of the range.
Okay.
Yeah,
20 to 50%.
20 to 50. Okay.
I just said 20 to 30, but yeah, somewhere in there is where a lot of.
And how big is the healthcare industry? What's the dollar amount? Do we? I know it's like 17 to 19% of GDP, but how many dollars does that equate to? Do you guys know off the top of your head?
That's a Jeopardy question.
Couple trillion.
What is a couple trillion?
20% of the economy.
Yeah. So 20% of the economy. So we're talking in the hundreds of billions, if not a trillion dollars.
Perhaps 4 trillion. I'm not good at T's and B's.
Yeah. It's big. Let's just say that it's a big. So whenever I look at things and people are like, oh yeah, we can get 5% or we can shave a couple points here, and all those things, like you said, Drew, are sort of just keeping us slightly on a less steep trajectory, but it's not cutting it off at the knees and resetting where we are in terms of a curve. This, if I were to just guess, sounds like this kind of resets where we are in the cost curve in a pretty dramatic fashion.
It changes the role of the plan sponsor from a passive payer, arguably an obedient payer, to becoming a proactive purchaser.
Okay. I like that.
Imagine becoming a proactive purchaser with the confidence of data behind you. The shield, the sword that you can wield people can't even imagine it yet. Mm-hmm. So that's the power that it's people don't know what to do, but they do it in every other part of their business.
Yeah. Just train them to do what they've always done on other parts of their business and actually apply that same logic to healthcare, correct? So what about, we talked a lot of theoretical, Brian, what about like an actual case study? Do you have any examples of how this has already worked for an employer today?
You know what? I have a case study for an advisor.
Okay. Yeah. Let's hear it.
That didn't embrace data 3 years ago. Okay, and I'll just give you a quick broker profile.
Okay. Yeah.
10-ish self-funded groups. Biggest one was on a platform. Okay, the other 9 not on a platform because it's expensive and hard to use. Okay.
Yep.
The top group didn't hardly log into the platform. Really, spent the money, didn't get full value. One of the same story. The second largest self-funded case was they lost to BOR.
Okay.
And one of the 2 reasons given was you didn't provide us any data.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
We were looking for advice and you didn't bring us any numbers. And my friend and colleague kind of pounded his fist on the table and said, doggone it, I'm not losing another case because of data again.
Yep.
That's not going to happen.
Yep.
And that was about 3 years ago. The broker profile today, 18 self-funded cases, all on the Innovu platform, growing like crazy, bought us another agency, I see postings for jobs on LinkedIn all the time. It's not a coincidence, right? Lean into it, and it changes the trajectory of your firm.
And I would 100% agree I've seen it firsthand myself where you're just providing real value and analysis like proactively on behalf of a prospect, right? And I've seen firsthand where some employers' minds have been blown about what was being discussed versus what they were getting in their current firm, right? And no name names or anything like that. But when they realize how much they've been missing, it's a very easy sale at that point to get them to sort of move the POR. So if you're not proactively having these conversations, and even not just the conversations themselves, but you're not doing this on behalf of it seems to me like it's a standard requirement to run a successful agency in 2022.
Amen.
It used to be a nice to have, and now it's a have to have.
Yeah.
It really is.
So in that case study, right, like do you know what that particular agency was able to leverage from some of that? Because you talked about the growth, weren't losing any more clients now, but are there any specifics that they go, whoa, this is what I get? You know?
Yeah, and they changed their marketing strategy entirely.
And kind of led with that.
To lead with data. Hey, this is what we do. This is how we use it. And this is where we can uncover opportunities for savings.
Well, I like it. It's really just sort of uncovering those pieces that have been ignored, or, I saw things like, we have way too much ER utilization around this one particular location of our company because that's all they have access to. It's a rural, location. They go to the ER.
Yep.
How do we divert them out of the ER? Again, you don't know that is happening until you've really done pretty far down in the data. You mentioned predictive, though. I want to come back to that a little bit because what is the usefulness or the accuracy, the utility of predictive side of analytics with risk scores and things like that? Or is that still too new to quantify?
It's reasonably new, but I think if you let's take a 0 to 10 scale, right? And if the risk score for your group, is in the, let's say 3 to 5, okay, you're no riskier than everybody else. If you show up as an 8 or 9, now we need to dig in deeper and say, okay, what's happening today that's causing us to have that risk score?
Okay.
So I think you use kind of these future risk score algorithms and then couple that with what actually happened.
Yeah.
Say, okay, now where do we need to point our arrow, so to speak, to try and help the problems?
What is the phrase is, past performance is not necessarily a predictor of future, whatever future outcomes or something to that effect.
Yep.
But it is a decent proxy for what potentially could happen.
It's a decent
future,
proxy,
right? Yeah.
indeed.
Drew,
Yes.
did you want to weigh in on that? I saw you kind of,
Please. So the system today, the three main stakeholders I referenced in the first half of this, if we had 100 we're XYZ employer in XYZ city, we had 100 somethings at a hospital last year, and our bill was $10 million. Let's use simple math. The system solves today, if you use population health and got people healthier, and we only had 70 episodes, the system will increase your price. They will charge you more for 70 things next year than they charged for 100 last year. It's called revenue optimization. There is software in the system designed for that outcome.
Yeah.
Okay. You need to fight data with data. You can't bring a knife to a gunfight. And so it's not just about it's better, healthy people are better, of course. But when the system says we're going to make money off of you no matter what, you need to unlock that. And that's, I want to shift on top of Brian's little case study. A broker partner of ours who embraced the CAA with Tony and the data with Brian and started hunting in May, new business this summer. We got an email less than a month ago, 3 new clients, $250,000, changing his message.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, part of it is difficult sometimes for these legacy agencies that have been going to market with some message for a very long time and pivoting to a new message that might undermine their old message, right? They're sort of handcuffed in what they were telling their clients for a period of time, right? So is there an artful way to kind of shift out of that darkness into the light a little bit?
Well, they have to, the first step to wisdom is to pursue it.
Yeah.
All right. So you have to become educated, and you have to decide, I want a different outcome. And if you want a different outcome, we're telling you right now, the CAA is your friend.
Okay.
And the data is a must. And if you put the two together, at the end of the day, no matter how many, you take a 26 increase from Buca to 16, or a 12 to a 4, and you go home. But now you got to come back and do an enrollment meeting, and nobody in that room can afford health care, even though you nipped the bud.
Yeah.
It didn't impact. So we're still, the path to affordable care for the people who need it is using the tools that we've discussed. They were designed for that outcome.
Well, guys, I know we've been talking for quite a bit of time, right, collectively as well. I think this has been a very powerful episode, and I'm very excited about releasing this. I want to talk to you, Brian, before we land the agility plane, if you will. I don't know exactly when this will come out. I'm presuming a few weeks or so from today, so let's put it late September, maybe October 1, something like that. if I'm a broker hearing this, a consultant hearing this, do I still have time for the fourth quarter at that point to make a change? Or, should I be shifting my thoughts to 2023 at that point?
You know what? I think there's seasonality to the broker business, correct? We all know Q4 is what Q4 is.
Yep.
And Q4 starts earlier now than it ever has. I don't think that investing in a platform is cyclical. Okay, so a platform can be plugged in at any time. Okay, and actually at this time of year, to get the data harvested and onboarded and so forth, there's a process there.
How long does that take traditionally? To get up and
It's
running?
probably, let's say, 3 months, give or take.
Okay.
There's paperwork to be signed. We need to request data, not in the mail any longer.
Yeah, thank goodness. Yeah.
Little more technology.
Yeah.
But there's a process. Okay, so even at this time of year, data is going to be up and running January 1, let's say, if you started today. So you need to build in, kind of this, let's say, 3-month window to get the platform loaded, and then you can start to realize some value. So I don't think it's necessarily cyclical like the benefit cycle, a traditional
what I'm
benefit
hearing
cycle
from
is.
you, the key message is this is a long-term decision
Oh, yeah.
for the rest of time, right? Like you don't just do it as a reactionary measure to bad renewals or something to that effect.
I mean, you're deciding to become a data-driven firm.
Yeah, and it's you're adopting almost like some people go through fad diets and some people make lifestyle changes. I mean, this is sort of a lifestyle change for your firm. Right?
100%.
Cool.
Exactly.
What about your perspective on this, Drew? And let's wrap it up, and then I want to hear closing thoughts from Brian. Tie this all together for me. We talked agility, we talked CAA, and we talked data analytics with Innovu and the coalition. Tie this all in a real pretty bow for me, if you don't mind.
Thank you. I'd love to. So as I'm going out now in September, October, and Q4, with I'm seeing all of my clients over the next 2.5 months at some level, and I started seeing them in July. Have a one-page summary of CAA and how data can be a part of their future, and weave that into your story now.
Okay.
It can be a part of every meeting you host between now and November 15. Number 2, start thinking critically, which of your clients are the highest priority to protect, and which of your prospects you want to go after. So prioritize your clients and your prospects. Begin onboarding, pick your partner. We've done a 5-year RFP. We suggest Innovu. Onboard your data, and then the coming year, when you write new business, expose and unlock the cost layers in healthcare. So it's a journey that way. So identify your clients first, upload their data, and then get busy.
Okay, then get busy. Yeah, you got to get busy. And do you think there's going to be any grace period at all with this? I realize it's a difficult thing to enforce as well as for actually people to be compliant at this point because it's such gray area. Do you think they might have a little bit of, like we've seen in the past, some grace period for these employers?
Yeah, so again, that's on the CAA side of the ledger. Start educating yourself. Once you put the ball in motion, you're in a semi-protected state. You're actually moving somewhere.
Okay.
When's the best time to plant a tree? 20 years ago. When's the second best time?
Right now.
Tomorrow.
Yeah, tomorrow. Okay. I do it right now, but that's just me.
Yep.
I'm a go-getter. Well, Brian, what about you? Let's kind of finish this up with your thoughts on data analytics, the future of data analytics, and where we go from here.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say, if you're an advisor today that doesn't have a platform, number one, you're not alone. Almost 90% are the same. And I just found it amazingly universal that those that didn't purchase a platform didn't purchase it for those two reasons, right? It's expensive and hard to use.
Believe it.
You're not alone. And it's not difficult to get started. Okay. It seems overwhelming, but it isn't as difficult if you have the wingman to help you get up and running.
And what's the best way for folks that have taken this call to action and want to get started? How do we get a hold of you guys?
Well, you can get a hold of us on LinkedIn, and just shoot us a note, and we'll get the conversation started.
Can you spell banking? I'll obviously tag you, but make sure
Yeah.
for the folks that are listening only, can you spell your last name?
Yeah, BEHNKEN.
Okay, Brian with an I, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Drew, what about you? What's the best way to get a hold of you as well?
So agilityinnovationpartners.com.
Okay.
And hpfid.com for Tony. HPFID, Health Plan Fiduciary Compliance.
Okay.
hpfid.com. You can find us at Agility. You can find us on LinkedIn, perhaps in the show notes. So we welcome the conversation. Call us to get started and just learn. Every 1,000-mile journey starts with one step.
I love it. Well, gentlemen, I really appreciate you, and as well as Tony, who's off camera over here. You know, I've got people traveling from Denver, Wisconsin, Omaha, Nebraska. I feel very fortunate and blessed that you guys were willing to make those separate journeys all to come here to be with me today. Thanks for educating me. Hopefully, thanks for educating the market as well, and I'm looking forward to releasing this one. I think it's going to be a fun one.
Appreciate it,
Thank you,
Spencer.
Spencer.
Bye, guys.